che io ho la doppia cittadinanza, sono stato meglio in Venezuela che oggi qui in Italia. Mi sentivo molto più libero in Venezuela. Ma è vero Sandra che passano, io credo che non passi giorno che non mi ricordi di lui. È stata una persona importante, insomma un maestro di vita.
Venezuela. Gran Sabana. By the time our story starts, this is a land filled with mystery and legend. Some of them old, such as the legend that El Dorado is hidden in this area. And others new, like the story about a 155-carat diamond discovered in 1942, the second largest ever found in South America. Then there was the story of Jimmy Angel, an American-born bush pilot and fortune hunter who found the river of gold flowing from the tabletop mountains the indigenous people called Ollantaytambo. There he had once collected 75 pounds of gold nuggets. In 1937, trying to relocate that river of gold, he landed his plane on the top of Ollantaytambo, but the wheels sank into the soft terrain and the plane landed nose up. It took 11 days for Jimmy Angel and his 3 companions to get off the mountain following the only climbable trail. It took another 18 years for the first person to reach the plane wreck on foot. That man was looking for the mountain's hidden treasures. Legend has it that he found them. That man was Alexandro Laime.
¿Amigo? ¿Laime?
No amigo, pero sí conocido.
Alejandro Laime fue el que encontró el avión de Jimmy Ángel.
Correcto.
Cuando se estrelló.
Correcto. Él fue. No, y lo más arrecho, Alejandro Laime trabajaba con el correo en Caracas. Alejandro Laime es un personaje único, que debería estar en la historia del Canadá. Porque hoy en día.
Laime es de Latvia.
Sí, Latvia.
Latvia es
Letonia.
ese arriba en el norte de Europa.
Es Letonia. Alejandro Laime es la persona que abrió el camino al Salvador.
We start our journey in Canaima. This is the world of Alexandro Laime, who found treasures in the jungles of Venezuela but never returned to either his native Latvia or to civilization. The town still remembers the path of Alexandro Laime, a person who gave life to this wild region. Canaima is the first stop for those who want to see the Angel Falls, one of the world's natural wonders hidden within the deep jungles of Gran Sabana. The town started out in the early 1950s with 6 palm-thatched huts built by the indigenous peoples in their traditional style. Today, it is a lively village with a number of tourist camps, shops, a school, and a paved landing strip for airplanes. Here we can meet some old-timers who still remember the beginnings of tourism at the Angel Falls. Richard is from Germany. He came to Venezuela in 1955.
Se empezó bajito. Al principio eran 3, 4 personas, llegaron al fin de semana, viernes a domingo. Y desde el domingo en la tarde hasta el viernes no había nadie.
¿Cómo conoció usted a Alejandro?
No, exactamente, él estaba antes aquí que yo y me hablaron de Laime, Bueno, por fin le llegué a conocer. Después yo hice excursiones para allá, para Vía Salto Ángel, y él vivía en mitad camino por ahí. Y siempre que yo pasaba, yo hice una parada allá. A veces le gustaba hablar y hablaba como un abogado, y después llegaste allá y ni palabra lo sacaste. Era un tipo un poco extraño, pero...
Giuseppe was another visitor who, attracted by Laime's personality, kept returning to him almost every year.
Ci siamo incontrati su proprio nella sua casa lì e mi è rimasto subito un colpo di fulmine, non so, è successo qualcosa con lui. E prima di partire, di rientrare, il giorno stesso, perché siamo stati lì solo una giornata, io ho detto: guarda Laime, io torno a trovarti sicuro. No, dice, guarda, tutti quelli che mi conoscono qui mi dicono: guarda, io torno, qui non è mai tornato nessuno. E vedrai che anche tu, quando torni nella tua diciamo, civiltà, non ti ricorderai neanche più di me. Invece no, invece non è stato così. Sono tornato volentieri e quando mi ha visto è rimasto sorpreso la seconda volta. Dice: no, dico, Laime, vedi, ti avevo promesso che tornavo, e lì sono rimasto con lui una settimana la prima volta. E da lì poi è partito questa ammirazione per un uomo eccezionale. Ripeto, un uomo di poche parole, però che mi è rimasto dentro fino ad oggi, che insomma sono passati 30 anni. Poi lui è già morto da tempo, però il ricordo rimane indelebile. Un personaggio incredibile.
When Laime arrived in Venezuela in 1940, this territory was still a jungle, almost impenetrable, a part of the globe that remained a dark spot upon the map of Central and South America. We can only guess what drove Laime to this wild region from the relatively calm Latvia where he was born into a tailor's family. He grew up in the industrial quarters of the city. His father struggled greatly to feed his family. Alexander was only 3 when the First World War burst, and he grew up with the feeling that war is a part of life. There was an image from his childhood he would never forget, still recalling it in conversations with his closest friends decades later. The eyes of a dead soldier he suddenly came upon while playing in his neighborhood. He felt that the dead young man looked right into his heart. Some 20 years later, when the next war broke out throughout Europe, his memories were still fresh. He found a job on a ship that finally brought him to freedom, to Venezuela. As he descended upon the lands of Venezuela, he learned that Russians had annexed Latvia, and, as he later on would write in an article, He felt he must escape that kind of future. During his first years in Venezuela, Laiме worked on and off as a topographer for the government and several oil companies. It was not long before he caught wind of Jimmy Angel, the mile-high waterfall, and his gold hunting expeditions to the Ollantaytambo. In 1941, he had his first chance to fly over the Gran Sabana and see the legendary Ollantaytambo with his own eyes. What he saw changed his life forever.
Nu, tā lieta ir tā, vai ne? Dimants viņam bija. To mēs zinām, ka viņam bija zelts un dimants, viņam arī bija paslēpts to. Tad viņš meklēja un gāja, viņš nopirka laivu, motoru, teiksim, tā kā kaut kādu naudu viņš jau dabūja, vai ne? Viņam naudas nebija. Kaut kā veidā viņš to visu nopirka. Tas bija zelta un dimantiem. Kas sauc almidonu?
We talked to Ernest Foldatz, a son of Laime's close friend, as they spent several years in the jungle together.
Viss, kas viņu pazina. Viņš zināja, ka viņam bija naudas, vai ne? Un es zinu, ka viņš ir aprasts, vai kaut kur aiz akmens, kaut kur viņš ir paslēpts. Es tiešām varu teikt, ka miljonāru summa, akmeņus un zeltu un visu.
A la meseta de la Ollantaytambo porque, según él, Jimmy Ángel daba cuenta de que existía allí un río con un lecho dorado. Y entonces él iba, generalmente él en busca de ese lecho dorado del río. Generalmente él llegaba a Ciudad Bolívar, vendía piedras, vendía oro, vendía piedras preciosas. Y eso más o menos lo sostenía, ¿no? Volvía. Sí, realmente fue un encuentro en mi calidad de periodista, ¿no? Porque yo en ese entonces era corresponsal del diario El Nacional de Caracas. Y por supuesto me tocó entrevistarlo algunas veces, ¿no? Y la última vez que lo vi y conversé con él fue en noviembre de 1970.
Se dice que también tenía una vivienda aquí en Ciudad Bolívar, ¿es cierto?
Bueno, sí, yo alguna vez lo encontré, como que tenía no una vivienda propia, sino que él alquilaba una habitación.
Pero usted sabe también la casa donde él vivía.
No recuerdo exactamente, ¿no?
Aquí él vendió su oro y diamantes.
Sí, por supuesto, sí, aquí hay numerosos compradores de oro y de diamantes de todas partes, ¿no? Sobre todo... Bueno, aquí encontré dos, no sé si habrá alguna otra, pero está muy buena para hacer.
We meet with Americo in Ciudad Bolívar, a town on the Orinoco River. In the early 1950s, it was the closest outpost of civilization to the Gran Sabana. From here, Canaima is just an hour-long flight. This is where Laime had chosen to set up his family for the years that he had one. In 1953, he meets Vilma Foldatz, a sister of his Caracas friend, Dr. Ernest Foldatz Sr. He falls in love with a woman who has already a daughter from her first marriage. As Vilma would later recall, she knew he was popular. By that time, Laime was already well known in the region, and that's part of what attracted her to him. Alexander laid the whole jungle at Vilma's feet. Together, they explored the dense forest around the Angel Falls. Together, they created the path to the top of Ollantaytambo. But once Vilma has her second child, the family returns to Ciudad Bolívar to continue their quiet life there. Laime's visits to that town become only long enough to sell diamonds and supply him with the basic necessities for life in the jungle. The family is really only together during the school vacation, when Vilma, Ilse, and Alex take a single-engine plane to Canaima. It's no wonder that Vilma one day packed her bags and moved to the United States. She wanted her children to get an education.
Naya bin
We follow Vilma to Pennsylvania, where she finally settled with both of her children.
Ilse? Well, how did I meet him? Це Draugen позиційним слідцем. Как-то все Лайме. Лайме, ну джунгли мы брод. That's interesting.
There was lots of diamonds. But sometimes he was off, but he was pretty good at it. He always came home with diamonds, and he himself would weigh them and cut them, and do everything that had to be done.
Because people disappointed him. They disappointed him.
Yeah.
Well, he probably has his reasons. He never told me about it. He just wanted to be by himself. And he had a very good health, so he wanted to be by himself. Because everybody tried to use him for something.
He wanted us to be in the jungle with him. He loved it. Every holiday, every time when he goes, let's go to the jungle. And then when Alex and I were little, we would go fine, we had no choice. He loved it when we were there. He loved to show you things, and he was a quiet man. He wanted his family, but he wanted it there in the jungle, away from the world. Because the world was greedy,
He wanted us to live in the jungle.
Yeah.
And he had children, they have to go to school. So.
That's good.
I know.
Life in the jungle was something that Laime was not ready to sacrifice, even for his family. In 1960, Vilma felt she had had enough, so she left. The only time the family came together again was in 1965, during the World's Fair in New York. It must have been a strange trip for Laime. Invited by the Venezuelan Department of Tourism to act as a feature attraction at the fair's Venezuelan pavilion, he set out for New York directly from his shack in the jungle. Acclaimed as one of the world's greatest authorities on the Lost World region by the New York press, Laime spent his time at the fair standing before a replica of the Angel Falls, telling visitors about his life in the jungle and showing them how to look for diamonds and pan for gold. Was it the prospect of seeing his family that made him go to New York? Or was he hoping to attract followers to his own austere lifestyle? Or perhaps he hoped to make amends with Vilma. If so, things between them just didn't work out.
Well, as soon as it could be this.
World's Fair?
World's Fair.
64.
1964.
New York.
Yeah, well. It must be a big diamond.
Yeah, but in New York was in 64 when we saw it.
Later, we visited Ilse alone to ask her some more questions about her stepfather.
I'm telling you, it's the truth. I'll swear on the Bible. I saw my stepfather in New York at the World's Fair. He took us everywhere in the World's Fair. You know what I mean? And then we had dinner. We stayed at a hotel in New York. And he took us everywhere. Matter of fact, he had a diamond he wanted to give my mother. She told you that. He was good to us, so whatever people say, I don't care. He was good to me, he was good to my brother, And every time he came home from the jungle, he always brought us comic books. He was into Donald Duck and Daffy Duck, in English, but he wanted us to learn English. It was in Canaima, it was near Canaima.
Near the river?
Near the river, where he had a diamond mine, on this side of the river. There's a lot of Indians there.
And that's the end of the 50s, beginning of the 60s.
No, I was there, we came in the United States in 62, so I was there in 58, 59, 61 is when we left Ciudad Bolívar to move to Venezuela again. The one place where we stayed when we were little, there was his shack, and in the back in the woods there was other Indians there. Our shack was like right there, and then the Indians were like where my mom's place is. You know what I mean? There was a whole bunch of shacks. I didn't know that they used to run naked, and wasn't used to running around naked. You know, I was like.
But your father spoke with the Indians. He knew their language?
Their own language. He knew their language. Yeah. But there was a couple of dialects, I think. You know, I mean, like the couple that sometimes came to my house. You know, where we lived. They spoke whatever he communicated with them.
Indigenous peoples played an important role in Laime's success in the region. Once he arrived in Gran Sabana, he got in touch with the locals. Later on, his visits to the Piman tribe, living on the southern flanks of the Ollantaytambo, became more and more frequent, until he quit his topographer's job altogether and settled with the local tribes. He learned their language, their customs, and their survival skills. People say he was even married once to the daughter of the tribe's chief.
Bija tāds runas, ka viņam bija viens dēls ar kaut kādu indiāni. Viņš bija blond vai ne, ar ziliem acīm, vai ne? Kas man tā drusciņ jocīgi izklausās, jo tomēr indiāņi ir dominanti, vai ne?
It is well known that Laime spent quite a bit of time with the Indians. He was recognized as one of their tribe. The newspapers called him a spiritual leader for the indigenous people living around Mayupa and Salto Acha, even to the point that they built him a rancho in which he lived. We can only guess why that occurred, but what we definitely know is that young locals still talk about Laime with great respect. Meet Demetrio, a guide to Angel Falls, who was very much inspired by Laime's adventures.
Así que el señor vivía aquí solo y lo conocí, y él se iba a Canaima a comprar en la tienda a comprar su comida, venía y se iba, venían así. Y él pasó él solo aquí, en este sitio. Y después vinieron a construir el campamento ya después de él. Y lo limpiaron, por eso no se ve nada aquí. La ceniza ya se va ya al año. Ya tiene casi 10, 12 años más o menos que después que se murió.
Do you know where he had the fire?
Fuego. Esta parte. Fuego. Sí, en esta parte. En esta parte. Y se lo lleva, allá están las piedras, que hacía para poner las ollas, las piedras, 3 piedras, aquí, lo ponía así.
Have you ever been inside his hut?
Sí, a tomar café con él. En esa fue que cuando tomaba café me tomaron fotos los alemanes y me enviaron esa foto. Eso lo tengo de recuerdo en la casa porque ya conocí que el señor era amable, él es buena gente con uno.
Was there anything in his hut that caught your attention?
Libros que escribía, tenía de todo. Él le gustaba escribir, tanto altura, tanto sobre el nivel del mar. Y él le gustaba caminar en la selva, ¿entiendes? A explorar, ¿no? Explorar, ver los indígenas como hablamos.
Still, there was one area in which the Indians were of no great help to Laime. They could not tell him much about the Ollantaytambo other than a few legends. They feared to pronounce the name itself, which in their language translates as the Devil's Mountain. To the Piman, the mountain was the home of Mawariton, evil spirits, and they avoided looking at it, let alone approaching it. To find the roots of the primeval fear of the indigenous peoples, we must know that the whole Gran Sabana is home to more than 100 tabletop mountains, tepuis in the language of the local tribes. Tepuis are remnants of a vast sandstone plateau that was already ancient some 200 million years ago. With their walls rising vertically more than 1,500 meters above the surrounding forest, the tepuis are accessible only to birds. The flora and fauna on top of these mountains have not been in contact with the rest of the world for millions of years. It's the kind of place that could have inspired Arthur Conan Doyle to write his novel, The Lost World. We can only wonder what force brings water to the top of Auyan Tepui, what river feeds the Angel Falls, the highest waterfall in the world, hidden in the jungles of the Lost World. With its 979 meters, the Angel Falls is 2.5 times as high as the Empire State Building and more than 15 times higher than Niagara Falls. The waterfall got its name from Jimmy Angel, a bush pilot whose plane once crashed on top of it. Jimmy Angel's stories about the river of gold that flows from Auyan Tepui was the first inspiration for Alexandre Laimer to investigate this area. It was also one of the reasons he agreed to guide an expedition undertaken by Ruth Robertson, an American photographer and journalist living in Caracas at that time. By 1948, Laimer was already well known in Caracas as the best expert and guide of the Grand Sabana outside of the indigenous peoples. So when Ruth Robertson decided to make an expedition to the base of the Angel Falls in order to measure its height, it was natural that she chose Laimer to guide the group. It was Laimer and his indigenous friends who made success possible for Robertson. He provided indigenous porters and boats, sketched out maps of the Auyan Tepui, cleared a landing strip for the airplane carrying the expedition to the Grand Sabana, helped to cut a way through the jungle, and led the group to its destination. On May 12, 1949, the expedition reached the Angel Falls. Their measurements confirmed Jimmy Angel's claims that this waterfall was the highest in the world. But the results of this expedition did not satisfy Alexander. He could not forget the words of Jimmy Angel, who would continue to say how foolish he was to leave this land filled with gold. So Alexander kept thinking of another way to get to the top of the mountain, this time from its northern side, as it would bring him right to the plain of Jimmy Angel and to the source of the largest waterfall in the world.
Bueno, exactamente. Laimer era prácticamente el único que subió. Era obviamente pues, ¿dónde está el Salto Ángel? Él dijo, yo subo por aquí. Yo dije, busca esa vaina. No, después encontré uno.
Are you sure he climbed up on this side?
Sí. No sé dónde subió. Es una grieta que sube por ahí mediodía con él.
Have you climbed up along that trail too?
No, yo no. Yo no soy loco.
They say he was searching for the river of gold up there. Do you think he found it?
No, que va.
Whatever he found was not the river of gold. His first successful attempt to reach the top of the Devil Mountain was a 7-day journey with Vilma in 1953. When he finally stepped on the ground of the summit, he felt he had arrived in another world. The Lost World. My first impression was one of terror, and I half expected to see one of the prehistoric dinosaurs, such as Sir Arthur Conan Doyle described in his fiction story Lost World, Laimer wrote. He saw huge, unfamiliar hoof prints, still fresh in the soil, of some unfamiliar animal. A butterfly that looked like a flying turtle went by, and a brilliant yellow bird landed on his head. That time, he had to leave, as a storm was approaching, but he promised himself that he would return, and he did. In 1955, he made a daring and much publicized climb to the top of the mountain to find the Flamingo, Jimmy Angel's wrecked plane. When, after several days of adventure and fighting against the dense vegetation of the mountain, he finally reached the plane, Laimer withdrew from the map compartment a folded piece of paper. It was a note left by Jimmy Angel on the day of the crash, dated the 9th of October, 1937. As Alexander stood reading the paper, he realized it was October 9th, 1955, exactly 18 years to the day. But it wasn't so much reaching the flamingo that made this expedition so special for Laime.
Él me dijo que había visto un animal zoológico con cabeza de pato y cuerpo de perro de agua, algo así, ¿no? Y que lo había seguido, pero como ahí hay ríos subterráneos, cavernas, no pudo darle caza al animal, pero él me dijo que lo había seguido.
The curiosity surrounding the mountain put Laime's prospecting work on the back burner. He settled down in Uruyen, on the southern side of Devil's Mountain, where he built his own camp to offer to the bravest tourists a trip that only he could guide. One that would bring them to the top of the mountain, to the place where the river that feeds the Angel Falls makes its spectacular plunge down into the canyon. But tourist expeditions were not Alexander's main interest. He wanted to see what else was hidden to the human eye atop of the Auyan Tepui. One day, while exploring a steep ravine, his foot slipped on a wet stone and he fell down, hitting one stone after another until he lost consciousness. When he awoke, he found himself lying on white sand in front of a cave. The sand all around him was covered with strange little human-like footprints. Ramon Jimenez, the owner of the shop where Laime used to buy his food for his solitary days atop the mountain, remembers the story well.
Sí, él al principio, él subía arriba en la montaña por unas escaleras, en la honda, y él veía huellas de gente. Es más, que él dibujó la huella en un papel y las trajo, y nos las enseñaba todito aquí a nosotros y hablaba de esa gente. Porque él decía que al principio él no los veía, pero llegó un tiempo que él vio unos de ellos.
Así que tenía alguna relación con ellos, se comunicó con ellos.
Sí.
¿Alguna cosa más que dijo?
Sí, él quería llevar la universidad para allá, para que los estudiantes hicieran una investigación de eso, pero con el tiempo, él no quiso que nadie fuera para allá.
We also talked to Omaida, another guide to the Angel Falls inspired by Alexander Laiме.
Un día caminando por una de las selvas, en un charco recién hecho, estaba ahí, solo una, nítida, fin. Ahí están las pruebas, pero no se sabe de qué es, en realidad.
And what did you think when you saw it?
Que era muy rara, claro, que no era de mono, que no era de oso, que no era ni de poatí ni de nada de lo que hay por aquí.
Did anyone else see anything of the kind?
Bueno, el señor Alexander Laiме, o sea, él siempre ha hablado de gente pequeña, todo el mundo siempre, no ha habido pruebas ni nada, pero él siempre ha dicho que hay gente pequeña que habita la montaña, que están arriba, que pueden bajar abajo, que de hecho eran amigos de él, que venían a buscarlo.
For Ilse, the abnormal activity on the mountain is of no great surprise.
There is something, I'm telling you, if you would have stayed longer, you would have seen it. I'll never forget it as long as I live. Even the lights, they were always shining like, I can't, like, you know, I said to my mom, I said, where do these lights come from? I mean, I know like my aunt thinks we're crazy or whatever. I'm not crazy. I know what I saw. You know what I mean? And if my brother he was too little, you know what I mean? And we would be like scared to be alone. I didn't want to be alone at night because everything happened at night. And it wasn't the Indians that were around there that scared you, because they didn't. They were very, you know, nice.
But didn't you ask your stepfather about it?
I did, and he says, it's okay, don't worry about it. That was it. What was his favorite word, you think? Neusrupes? Something like that. It was like, don't worry about it, you know, like. And, you know, I would say, you know, is there really flying saucers? And he said there was, and I believed him. Because there was lights.
The next stop of our journey is New York. Here we meet Dr. Jānis Rose, herpetologist, one of around 700 Latvian refugees who ended up in Venezuela after the Second World War. Today he continues his research in New York, but still passionately recalls his life in Venezuela. Laime, whom he first met in 1950, was a big part of it.
Bet sakiet, Laime šeit bija arī 65. gadā, kad Ņujorkā bija tā pasaules izstāde. Tad jūs ar viņu netikāt?
Es zināju, ka viņš bija šeit, bet ar viņu netikos. No. Jā, 65. Jā. Viņa māsa bija šeit, Brigita, Vilmas māsa bija šeit, jā. No, es viņu nesatiku tajā. Es biju tajā izstādē, klāro, bet skaidri, bet...
Why do you think he didn't stay in New York that time? By then, was it already more natural for him to live in the jungle?
He had the practical knowledge. And he knew how to handle nature. When we were walking with him on a trail, one could feel that he is at home. You know, I dare say I also feel at home. I am very, very comfortable walking through the jungle and knowing and exposing and seeing things. And I know that he was really perfect in being within the nature. You know, he was part of the nature, so to say.
But wasn't he dependent on so-called civilization? Or on gold and diamonds, at least, as they make up part of the civilized world.
Priekš viņa tas zelts un dimants acīm redzot bija tā centrālā enerģijas vieta, kur viņš varēja viņus atrast un tad braukt uz Karakas un pārēt. Un, protams, mēs neviens nezinājām, kā viņš to īstenībā dara. Viņš negribēja, lai mēs to zinām, un ok. Tas bija, bet tas bija viņa kaut kā tā viņa dzīvības līnija, kas viņam gāja apkārt, you know, tā zelta un dimantiem. Un acīm redzot, viņam bija pietiekoši daudz, lai viņš varētu diezgan labi dzīvot. No otras puses, kad viņš izbeidza savu naudu, esot Karakasa, viņam vienmēr vajadzēja, palienēt no citiem cilvēkiem naudu. Un no man brāli, no Pētera, viņš palienēja naudu. Man liekas, Ernests viņam arī palienēja tajos laikos, un nebija viegli tu naudu dabūt atpakaļ.
But still, this wasn't the only thing that kept him in the jungle. Did he tell you anything about the creatures that he met up on the Tepui?
Jā, vienreiz, bet, you know, viņš baidījās to stāstīt, jo pa laikam cilvēki neticēja viņam. You know, jā, viņš te, un, kad viņš man to stāstīja, es kā samurai, tu tic visu, ko tu tev tek, un netic neko, ko tev saka, kad samurai veļ. Un tad es paliku domāt, jo kad viņš bija tāds puspiedzēries, tad viņš neturējās atpakaļ, tad viņam patikās runāt vairāk un vairāk.
People who knew Laime in his later years remember him not as a gold and diamond prospector, not even as an explorer in search of plants and animals. They remember him mostly as a man preoccupied with puzzling through the mysteries he saw and experienced during his many years in the jungle. These mysteries concerned the prehistoric past and the remains of unknown civilizations on Earth. They also concerned the true meaning of reality and human consciousness. Sometimes he experienced moments of crystalline clarity, moments of visions similar to those described by the saints. In Venezuela, we find more explanations to that metaphysical story.
Sí, Alejandro Laiме buscaba los secretos de la montaña, que él decía que había una ciudad debajo de esa montaña y que esa ciudad eran las mismas ciudades que existían en la civilización inca. No son los indios incas que se conocen en el Perú, sino una civilización inca que se conocía mucho antes que viniera el hombre aquí a la tierra. Entonces, como él decía que el hombre venía con mucha maldad, entonces el Inca, para aquel tiempo, que utilizaba todo lo que es la tecnología del sol y todo eso, cuando el hombre viene a la tierra, él desaparece delante de los ojos de los hombres y se van de aquí, pero muchos quedaron, pero nadie los ve, sino que están metidos bajo esas montañas. Entonces, él decía que debajo de esa montaña habían ciudades de esos incas.
Did Laime tell you anything about the small people?
Él dice que él logró entrar en esa ciudad una vez y que hay una entrada por el sol y la luna, o dos tepuy que hay muy grande. Y ahí hay una entrada. Entonces, el sol y la luna, Tepuy.
Ah, Tepuy.
Entonces él dice que por ahí hay una entrada. Él logró entrar una vez, pero después no lo dejaron entrar más.
Kad es runāju agrāk, ka mēs runājām par Laimes indiāņu draugu, ka viņam bija draugs. Viens no tiem draugiem, indiāņu, ko mēs satikām, ka mēs dabūjām tos datus ar Andreju Starbo priekš to grāmatu, bija par to entitāti, ko viņš runā, ka ir daži vietas, kur viņš zina, ka laiks sadalās. Tas ir grūti izskaidrot, kā viņš skaidroja ar. Viņam arī bija grūti saprast, bet teiksim, iedomājies, ka es esmu šeit pašlaik un līdz Karakas centra ir pusstundas laika, lai visātrāko aiziet. Viņš kaut kādā veidā tik 5 minūtēs. Tad viņš saka, Laime to darīja. Viņš kaut kur ļoti tālu un kaut kādā veidā viņš parādījās ļoti ātri atpakaļ. Jāprasa, viņš tiešām aizgāja. Tur jau ir tā lieta, vai ne? Vai tā ir taisnība? Es to nezinu. Bet tā tas indiāns stāstīja par Laime, ka viņš to bija izdarījis. Viņš kaut kādā veidā zināja, varbūt tā ir tā 5. dimensija. Kas to zina?
E un'altra cosa che ti ricordi che ci ha raccontato quella sera lì è che lui, dopo anni e anni di vita nella foresta da solo e di meditazione, era riuscito a uscire dal proprio corpo. Ti ricordi?
È vero, mi ricordo benissimo, sì. Lui si poteva guardare dall'alto e si vedeva lì nella sua amaca.
E noi siamo rimasti, chiaramente anche i miei figli, che erano 2 ragazzini allora, 2 bambini, sono rimasti affascinati da questi racconti di questa persona, e credo che abbia segnato, come ha segnato noi, credo che abbia segnato anche un pochino le loro vite, i loro ricordi, per quanto fossero piccoli, no?
È vero, sì, sì.
Laime's quest for the understanding of these mysteries brought him to a new trail of exploration. His library was supplemented by hundreds of new volumes on the subject, but in the long run, even the books proved useless for his task.
Allora, questi libri sono una piccola parte dei libri che Laime aveva giù nella sua casa in Canaima. Un bel giorno ha deciso che non voleva leggere più, che aveva letto talmente tanto, perché qui ce n'è 300, 400 circa, però lì si trattava di qualche migliaio di libri, perché la casa era completamente foderata, la casetta naturalmente, foderata di libri. Poi tutti questi libri sono letti non una volta, 10, 20 volte. Ogni frase veniva ripetuta per capire bene quello che intendevano, no? Quello che voleva lui imparare o capire. Allora un giorno ha deciso di dire basta, non leggo più, però ha voluto che io tenessi, se avevo piacere, che tenessi una certa parte di libri più interessanti. Cosa è successo? Abbiamo acceso un grande fuoco, il fuoco è durato 3 giorni e niente, lui ha scelto i libri, questo diceva sì e questo no, e via il fuoco, questo sì, questo no, questo sì. Insomma, questo fuoco è durato 3 giorni e 3 notti, perché i libri, insomma, per bruciare ce ne vuole di tempo, e abbiamo messo da parte un 300, credo, libri, 350, e me li sono portati in Italia.
¿Y sabe usted cómo murió?
Se murió encima de la poseta en Canaimatura. Camina por aquí para adelante.
Sí.
El primer campamento que ves aquí es Canaimatura.
Ah, a la izquierda.
Sí.
Ah, ahí.
Ahí se murió. Bueno, yo no sé ni cómo está, si la tumba, cómo está, en qué estado está. Yo tengo tiempo que no voy para allá.
¿La tumba está dónde?
Cerquita del aeropuerto.
Sarmati baznīcā, es izdzinu ganos, miegā māte šūpos savu mazu eņģeli. Ai, 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 savu mazu eņģeli.
Laime died in March 1994. His death was unexpected. In the final years of his life, he kept on the floor, in permanent readiness, his old canvas backpack, for what he called his last expedition. Then you won't see me anymore, he said. Laime will be gone.
Laime había un camino para ir al Salto Ángel. Ese camino, con el paso de los años y árboles que cayeron, decidimos abandonarlo y hacer un rodeo, como quien dice, por un pedazo de la ruta. Y bueno, como a veces el camino es estrecho, pues a veces la gente también va más lenta caminando, pues llegó un momento en que un turista se separó un poquito del grupo y llegado a ese sitio, pues en vez de agarrar por un lado, agarró por el antiguo. Pero claro, el antiguo está todo trancado de plantas, o sea, es más difícil. Y esta persona pues se sintió como perdida, porque veía que el camino cada vez era peor, que no parecía camino ya. Y entonces nada, un viejete que había por ahí le dijo que por ahí no era, la sacó del camino ese viejo y la puso en la ruta. Entonces esta señora, cuando llegó abajo al hotel, que siempre preguntamos cómo les ha ido en las excursiones a la gente y todo esto, viendo una foto que había en la oficina, dijo, ay, mira, este señor es el que me ayudó a encontrar el camino nuevo, porque yo me metí por el antiguo. Me lo dijo este señor. Y ese señor llevaba muerto ya como 2 años, o 3. Porque este señor era Alexandre Laime. Sí, eso se cuenta aquí también, ¿no? O sea...